So after that cracking session moderated by Radhika and the amazing team of investors who have really shaped the ecosystem for so many women in, not just for women, but just as we built out the whole ecosystem, which is fairly nascent, let's get on to another side of investing, which is really early stage. So I am here also as a founder of Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs, which I started in 2015. But prior to that, many moons ago, of course, I went to Stanford, so I'm an alum. I've run tech businesses, I've built businesses. And then in 2006 is when I started, along with some other co-founders, a fund called Seed Fund, which was called Seed Fund because there was no seed stage investing at the time. So it was really, really the early stage investing in India. Having been in the Bay Area and in the innovative ecosystem of Stanford, of course, I'd interacted with lots of startups, lots of VCs, and had a bit of an idea about how this should be. But when we started in 2006, it was a completely different scenario in India. It was not very exciting for, let's say, IIT kids to be startup entrepreneurs. They all looked for lucrative jobs. And I'll tell you a funny story because Radhika told me I must use funny stories. But we had one entrepreneur, who was a IIT Kanpur alum. And, we had decided to fund him. He was a health tech entrepreneur as well at the time. And one day, an elderly gentleman walked into our office, which was just down the road at Worli. And he specifically asked for me because I was on the board of that company that this young alum had founded, IIT alum. And he said, can you please free my future son-in-law from all the debt? He's taken crores of rupees from you and I don't want him to do this. Otherwise I can't marry my daughter to him. And they've decided. I said, I've given no debt. He is debt-free. He said, no, you've given him so much. So they had no idea what, that you would give money as equity. And literally, that co-founder actually, he took an exit, I should say. But he went and joined TCS, actually. Because the father-in-law was adamant that you will not be an entrepreneur and that too with somebody else's money. Fast forward to today, there's a whole line of, IIT kids who want to only do startups and they'll give away great offers. So wonderful time to be here. I was also, I can relate to all the funny stories, that everybody said about not having eye contact and looking behind. Been there, absolutely. I've had a founder, very young founder, again an IIT kid, and he was really a kid, he was 22. And me and my colleague, who also happened to be a woman at Seed Fund office, he thought that, he said, we'll wait for the partners to come. And he ordered tea and coffee with us. So he assumed we were assistants and note takers, like you guys said. So, and I often used to say that I remember every woman who has pitched to me, and I do remember Neha very well. That's because there were such few women who pitched at the time. Things have changed and we see many more women coming, so it's a great time to be. But coming to the topic that Radhika has asked us, from investing to exits, right? Fundraising to exits. So I'm going to use these amazing founders to really demonstrate what creating a company and then taking it to exit means. And what's that journey like, particularly at the time of exit? Now, as an early stage investor, we're always talking about modeling an exit as soon as we start evaluating a company. Because as a fund, we have to give an exit. To our investors, we have to give returns, which only comes from exits. As a founder, or even as a parent, you're really not talking about how when your child goes away from home, you really want to be part of the journey. So we sort of seem to be on opposite sides as investors and founders. I don't know if that's really true, but I'm going to actually, before I hand over or really get into deep questions with you two and get you to introduce yourselves, I'm going to do a quick rapid fire to set the stage. I hope that's okay. Unfortunately, I think one of the founders couldn't make it, so we'll use just the two of you. So I'm going to start with you, Neha. Passion or profits as a founder?
Passion.
Jyotsana?
Same. Can you hear me? I don't. Passion.
Passion. Okay, I wonder what the investor answer is going to be. Exit or execution?
Execution, always.
Same. Execution.
Execution. Okay, this is going to be tricky. VCs are vulture or nurture?
A bit of both.
Okay.
I thought of another way of asking the question: is a mentor or dementor? I think, in the best case, it's a mentor. In
That's
some
a good
cases,
one.
no.
That's a good. Scale or sanity?
Both.
Scale.
Okay, that's a good one. The VC likes to hear. Burn or conserve?
No option to, I mean, you have to burn, but ultimately, long term, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
And we'll come back to this as we talk about the exit. Jyotsana?
Optimize.
Optimize. Okay, that's a good business school answer. And last one, which is so much the flavor of the day: valuation or value?
Value.
Value.
So I think most of the investors will agree on most of these things. Passion or profit depends who you are. And Soumya alluded to patient capital, and there is patient capital there, family offices or angels, and I'm going to keep plugging in angels because I am representing Stanford Angels, and we do early stage investing as angels, where exit may be viewed differently. But by and large, investors, like I said, need to give exit. So when we meet a founder, in our mind, we are already seeing the exit. But as founders, when you founded, and let's start with you, Neha, when you founded Fitternity, were you thinking of the exit? And before that, please talk a little bit about yourself so we can get the context.
Thanks, Paula. You were introducing yourself, and I was like, I think the one word is legend, because you really have started angel investment and access to capital and women founders, sort of that mentoring journey, and you're the true sort of legend in that sense.
Thank you.
I think a quick sort of introduction about me. I'm Neha. Basically, I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I was in consulting, and in 2013, I basically was wanting to find a yoga class, and I went on to Just Dial and felt that the whole experience was very broken. And in my naive and innocent way, I was like, this has to be online. You can book inventory, classes, no need to buy a membership, look at the reviews, look at pictures. And I think this was, of course, 10 years back, right? And I quit my job and started. And as Fitternity, we sort of reached 12 million users, aggregated 8,000 gyms and studios, pivoted into multiple models, brutal time to be aggregating fitness industry. But thankfully we had some amazing investors and really sort of kept going. In 2021, we were acquired by CureFit. It was a great acquisition for everybody, and I joined the CureFit team for 2 years, worked and really sort of 1 + 1 11. We really sort of built out, the journey there. Yeah, I think that's about me. And I think to answer your question, Paula, I think what you said, right? For a founder, I don't think exit should be looked at the initial period as the way you want to go about it, right? And I'll sort of take an example, right? There are two ways to approach, right? One is input forward or outcome backwards, right? And I think every time we've been told, right, you should be outcome backwards, which means that you need to plan and say that, okay, 3 years from now, you want to be X, Y, Z, and hence you need to build it from now this way, right? Brick by brick. But I think you can't build outcome backwards for an exit, right? And I'll tell you why, right? Exit is actually in 3 forms: either IPO, a larger company acquiring you, or your investor gets a secondary from another incoming investor, right? In all 3 cases of these different exit options, ultimately what you need to do is you need to grow. You need to actually build a business where there is a need. You're bridging that need well, and you're bridging that need at scale, right? And if you're doing all of these 3 things right, exit is going to happen, right? So to answer your question, I think while it is something that's always there at the back of our minds, but it should not be an outcome backward game. More than that, it should be an input forward game.
Jyotsana?
Can you hear me? I'm not so sure that this mic works. Sorry? Not as well. Can we do something about this? I'll just take a mic. Huh? Hello? Yeah. Right. So, thank you. First of all, thank you all for being here. And thanks to Radhika for organizing it. It's a wonderful evening. So I'm Jyotsana. I started my career as an engineer. I helped build one of the world's earliest online payment systems. And then, before that, I thought I wanted to work for a big company. And then when I got bitten by the startup bug, I felt like I wanted more. It was like a drug. So if you look at my LinkedIn profile, you'll just see that my tenure was 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years, right? Because I always wanted change. I wanted change all the time. I also went to Stanford. I went to Stanford Business School. I then, worked with a bunch of companies, helped build businesses. And my thing was like, what can I change? What can I change? What can I change? Which made me very annoying to be around. But then at some stage, I realized that I was now working for Fortune 500 companies and not like scrappy startups. Around that time, I also had my son, and I had like a health event at that time. And this kind of leads into why I started a health company. It took a long time for the light bulb to actually go on, several years actually. Started GrowFit many years later, having worked for some venture funded companies, scaled them and helped them get exits. The light bulb went on that similar to what Neha said, when I was having this crisis, the only thing that helped me was, during my pregnancy, was healthy eating and some amount of exercise. I was on bed rest. That it sounds restful, but it's not. You're really just bedridden. It's just a better way of saying it. And then when I started GrowFit, the idea was to be more of a app. That pivoted. We realized that people don't want to be given advice. They want all the friction to be taken out. So they're like, well, don't give us a diet chart, but if you show up, you give us the food, we'll eat it. I'm happy to talk about that journey as well. Then pivoted and scaled it to close to like 3,000 orders a day, raised venture capital. And then during the pandemic, got some good offers and exited. Paula was an investor and known her for many years in many forms. So that's a little bit about my background. In terms of the exit, honestly, I think it is very hard to exit a company that you feel that only you can build in the way, true to your unique insight. You feel like nobody can do it the way that I can, which may be true to a point, but at some stage, if it needs to achieve its next avatar, then the chances are, you need to hand it off to somebody else, right, who has a different vision, maybe, and the ability to execute it and take your idea to other places. That said, I don't think an entrepreneur can start with the exit, like a venture-funded entrepreneur, let me put it that way, probably cannot start with exit first, simply because you don't know how the future is going to unfold. And that's why a lot of VCs will say, we bet on the founder, because even we don't know how I'm a VC now with Paula's firm, but even we don't know how the future is going to unfold. What we rely on is for the founder to surf those waves, right, and take us to the culmination of that journey, right? So it's very hard for someone in a tech-led space or an emerging market space, which is where ventures funders invest in, to predict what the outcome is going to be. So I think we can't plan for the exit. It's just not possible in this kind of unpredictable space.
That's a great perspective, because actually my next question was going to be, can founder and investor be on the same side? And rationally, of course, they're always on the same side, because you want to build a company, like you rightly said, Neha and Joe as well, that we really want to be part of a journey that will lead to some value creation, which is an outcome, may lead to an exit at some point. But tell me, did you ever feel, when you were dealing with investors right from the fundraising time, that I now have this gun to my head, that I must grow at a certain level, go to a certain direction, or whatever the flavor of the season would be at that time, so that I can be this sexy company that this investor would really want to exit and show off? if I put it a little bit crudely. But the point is that we hear so many times from entrepreneurs that, you know, the VCs or the investors pushed me in a certain way because they wanted to have this quick growth, you know, and the company needed a lot more patience and a lot more, you know, way to figure out how really to build and execute well. And we really felt that, you know, we would have done things differently. So the two questions, one is, would you have done things differently looking back, you know, now that you've exited, for both of you? And also, did you ever feel that you were really pushed in different directions because of the pressure of investors? Or even if you have other cases where you've seen this happen around you as founders?
Sure. So I think your second question first, Paula, I think it really matters in terms of who you get on your cap table, because it's literally marriage. And I think I was fortunate enough to have investors where there was no unnecessary push into any sort of direction with regards to the business model ever. And I think that's the first thing, right, for a founder, which is super critical. I think all the investors that we had on our cap table, and we raised 3 rounds of funding, all of them were always you know, very, very conscious of what our call was as founders, and they basically put it out to us saying that these are your options, and sort of guided us. And I really feel like that it's really important. I think money is important, but color of money is more important. And I think on your first question, what I would have done differently, see, I think overall, right, and I sort of read this somewhere and I really resonate, right? Like somebody asked, what is it to be an entrepreneur? And the answer came that to be an entrepreneur is to ride a lion, right? Somebody outside looking at that person is like, oh my God, how glorious. Look at this person's riding a lion, and, you know, she has it all together, you know, amazing, look at her. And the person who's riding the lion is wondering, how the hell did I get on it and how do I get off, right? So I think if you sort of look back and, you know, sort of for me, that 8 years of, you know, building Fitternity and then exiting, right? It's a crazy roller coaster ride, right? And I think if I were to sort of think about what I could have done differently, a lot of things. Can't sort of begin to start, but zeroing in on something, I think because the startup ecosystem was not very evolved, I think beyond the investors that we had, I think we were not reaching out and talking to people. We were very sort of, you know, inside and wearing blinkers and working. I think now ability to get mentors, talking to other founders, and having that outside-in perspective is something that I think I lacked as a founder. So if I sort of do it again, I will ensure that I have a board of director, not for the company, but also for my life, right? Who can guide me.
Thank you. So, Paula, you were talking, basically you were referring to what are the role of investors on the board. I think, so the GrowFit journey had many twists and turns. As I mentioned, we started off as an app. At some stage we realized we have so much data, nobody has this data. We mined that data from the app, and we were very, very hypothesis driven. And this is all way back at 2016 time frame, right? So many of these things are now common wisdom, but at that time, it was really, nobody thought that you could reverse chronic disease just with the food that you ate. Now everybody accepts it, but at that time we were a pioneer. We realized that conventional wisdom didn't work. We started, a kitchen just to feed like a few test subjects and to see what happened. And that small group of test subjects grew and grew. And they were getting more and more people to join because there was a visible change in the people who were on that group. And one of our investors pointed out, like, maybe this is the business that you need to be in. You need to be in the food business, not in the app business. And for me, that was a huge, it was not what I expected to be doing. Because my background was technology, product management, product marketing. I was like, all of a sudden, very operational thing. I'm not that thrilled about it. But when we saw that, then I also had to come around to the point of view that actually this is what drives health. By giving people healthy food, we can actually drive their outcomes. And that was for me like a big aha moment. Would I have done something differently looking back? I think I was very like product and customer focused. I should have spent more time managing the investment side. Sometimes you hear about, entrepreneurs who are spending all their time with the investors, and within the entrepreneur community, we do look down on them a little bit. We're like, who is this person just pandering to the investors? But I think some amount of the mental journey has to be in terms of, how do I raise the next round of funding? Who's going to be on my side? Especially in today's day and age, I think that's a, wise caution to have, and to also actively manage your board of directors, right? I think that is still area of kind of not a great area in terms of how we see, in the sense, what value add does the board give you, right? Where are your people who are your backers, who are you taking advice from, who's got skin in the game? And I think a lot of really good entrepreneurs, do that. They have a board that supports them, pushes them, and can give them good feedback, harsh feedback, and they have that collaborative relationship with them. They're not always in agreement, but they're able to have tough conversations. And I think spending more time building that board would have made a difference to me.
No, that's really important, because I think, investor and founder, really it's like a partnership. I think it's often just the lens that is different. But I want to just get back to your early days when you were fundraising, and to the topic of today. There were not that many women investors. There were few of us when you raised. And also, as women founders, one is getting in front of investors for fundraising, but also building your teams as founders. We heard from fund managers who had to get in front of people like IFC, etc., to raise money, but you had to actually, it was just very key for you to survive, right? To go and raise money from these funds or other investors. Was there, as women, was it more difficult? Do you think, if you look back today, and Joe, you're on my investing team now, so you know what it is like to be on the other side. But I want to ask this in two parts. One is, as a woman, did you find, when you talk to the males or, investors out there, also both of you happen to be from the health sector. And pre-COVID, it was not really a very sexy sector, wellness or health, for VCs. So both in terms of women and both in terms of the sector, was there any advantage or disadvantage when you were doing your early fundraising? Because once you succeed and you have things to show, it's different. But when you do that first fundraise, you are really, as investors, we're really judging the founders. And I'll again tell you a quick story. I had a very young but very enterprising young woman whom we were funding. This was back in 2011 or 12. We had given her the term sheet, and when she'd actually come to sign, and she just happened to tell me in conversation that she's going to get married next month. And I actually pulled back the term sheet, and I'm a woman investor, saying, but I didn't know you were getting married. Because in my mind now I'm saying, okay, my exit will come after 4 years, and God knows where she'll be, and maybe she would have moved, or we'll have kids or whatever. So we are all conditioned with certain biases, right? That just before that, another male entrepreneur, a founder, had come to give his wedding card, and this thought never crossed my mind. So there is a difference, especially when you don't have much to judge in very early stage, and you are only evaluating the founder, and of course the founder's fit for that idea, and the idea's ability, that particular company to scale at the time. But this is a variable that does weigh heavily on the investors. So if you could share any stories from your early fundraising, both for the sector and for yourselves as the woman founder out there.
I'm sure, yeah. A lot of people thought like I was literally making the recipes in the kitchen and like telling people what to eat and stuff like that. Honestly, you do not want to eat anything that I've made. All the chefs in the kitchen were like men. And like, food is a very male-dominated industry. So that was one very weird thing. The second thing, investors always wanted me to speak with their wives. They're like, please talk to my wife. She's an expert on food. I was like, all right. I mean, they were well-meaning, so I went along with it. But like, this is really, absurd, honestly. And so, well, a lot of times I have to actually pander to the wife. I'd be like, how's this? Do you like this food? Or I'll slap the chef who made it. No, I didn't really do that. But I was like really saying that like a lot of people had the opinion about the food, not about the business or whatever. So this was just something that I had to like, smile and go along with it and incorporate feedback. Incidentally, we made incorporating feedback like a really key component. That's why we were able to get like one of the highest repeat rate among health food in all of India. So that was one, really a core tenet. So I made lemonade out of lemons. So that was, I think, one aspect of it. I really feel like a lot has been said about how investors look at women. I think that was one of the reasons why I didn't have any co-founders. I knew that like if it was a man, then they would always talk to him, and if it was another woman, that would be like, maybe the whole issue would be compounded. So I was the whole and sole founder, and I think like people have different successes, and this was my way of thinking about it. They also had a feeling that I couldn't do math. I thought it was because I was a woman, but I soon realized that many of the investors will pose these math problems to many people, like, oh, let's in 5 years you want this thing, discount that, how much, or what was your some specific thing, right? And so I learned to like memorize all these numbers and like spit them out, right? Even today I can actually memorize a bunch of, I have it somewhere in the back of my head, data that I've seen like only once, like 6 months back or something. So these are some of the skills that I had to pick up as a woman founder.
So I think my story has been a little different, honestly, and I think, maybe I'm sort of coming from a lot of luck and privilege, but I actually didn't have an issue, and I think that's also a great example that I'm sitting here raising 3 rounds of funding and never really faced this, right? My first round of funding came from Xfinity Venture Partners, IT veterans sitting in Bangalore, Mohandas Pai, everybody, all of them, like 15 men, and I was the only girl, and never a question about personal life, age, nothing whatsoever. I think it was always down to what you're building. Is it relevant enough? Is it important? Are you building it with profitability, etc., right? Second round of funding, again, family offices. Third round of funding. So across the board, I think I have never faced it. And touch wood, I feel like that is the change. And I'm sort of proud to say that, because even till today, when I talk to my investors and when I ask them, over an informal session, I think all of them are like, no, you know what, I think what mattered is the product that you're building, and the gender didn't have anything to do with it, which I think is the right way to do it. Yeah. And if there can be one me sitting in front of you, I'm sure there are many others, and there will be many others.
No, so these are the kind of stories actually we need to amplify, because there are many women founders out there who have raised capital. More importantly, they've built large teams, they've scaled, and they've built, really good companies of value. Having said that, we just need many more women like this to inspire, and to also demonstrate to the investing community that, this is really how you build confidence. So my question to Radhika was going to be, we should have more men in the room next time, because they need to hear this. And they need to also recognize that, we need to change a little bit. And really, there are many men who are investors who are very, very supportive. And like I think it was said in the earlier panel also, in the end, it comes down to what you're building, how you're building. And the investor will also obviously make a judgment call based on that. But definitely we need more of these stories, to stand out and to be circulated. I want to come back to your journeys. Like both of you said, and you both chose sectors which are not that easy, because when you're doing health or wellness, you are actually getting into very personal areas of your consumers, their well-being, and it's a different type of a risk. How did you actually think deeply about this. And the reason I bring this up is many times we find that founders don't think from the other person's perspective. Because many a times as an investor, I find a lot of the founders are so much in love with their own idea and their own product. The other stakeholders are not really central to it. As you built these businesses, clearly you both built valuable businesses with stakeholders in mind. What would you tell founders today, of things to really do to keep, all the stakeholders in mind, and that also includes investors?
So I think, when I started Fitternity, fitness, I was really passionate about it, and I sort of was super lucky that we pivoted and we actually reached a model and it worked out. But I think what I would recommend is when you're starting out, and I completely agree from where you're coming from, I think it's super important to look at TAM, what is the total addressable market, and that's, I think, the number one layer. Second is what is the product differentiation and what is the defensibility of your product. Third is how you can scale and really can you build scale with profits, right? And if you're able to answer these three questions, and these are tough questions, right? I didn't ask myself these questions because 2013 was very early, and the whole startup ecosystem was just starting out at that point of time. But I think it's super critical, for women who are starting out now, to look at TAM, to look at the differentiation, defensibility. And I think the other bit, right, which I always sort of say is that, there have been so many women who have been instrumental in actually my journey. And these have been early angel investors, they have been actually large, corporates that have backed Fitternity in terms of our corporate fitness partners, right? And they are all women, and they have all met me via a LinkedIn message, right? I did not have a warm intro to them, and I literally sent a message on LinkedIn, and they accepted, and they met me, and they helped, right? So I really do feel like we do not go out there and ask. At max, it will be no. And you'll be surprised at how many women founders are willing to help and willing to sort of pay back and pay forward. So I think these are some of the things that I would recommend.
Jyotsana, I want to just put a little bit of a different twist to it, right? You obviously were also very concerned about the consumer and so on, but you had a bit of a setback when COVID came. Mm-hmm. And how did you then think of the TAM and your product and how to take it forward? Yeah. Incorporate that in your answer as well.
Absolutely. So I think one of the surprises for me when I was getting into food is how volatile it is. Honestly, like, don't go to business school, spend like 6 months at a restaurant and you learn everything. You learn competitive pricing, you learn supply chain, you learn all that stuff, right? Consumer demand. So I think that we had kind of worked through all of this when COVID came along, and then just kind of upset the apple cart, not in terms of anything else, but in terms of lockdowns and kind of how the demand was shifting. It was no longer predictable. What we kind of began to focus, like laser focus, was not on growth but on profits. And we basically made sure, profitability was very, very close. The burn was very limited. So I just, I think the major thing is, the only certain thing is uncertainty. And I think COVID just amplified that entire process. And I think, we had to then tell all our investors, stakeholders. So for example, previously, because of all the, previously we used to have a stand-up meeting just within the team, for the exec team. So every day we used to have a stand-up meeting. For 15 minutes, we'll run through all the metrics and so forth. Now, when COVID came along, there were no more, we opened the, stand-up meeting to the entire company. So everybody could dial on, get to Zoom, listen to us, walk through the metrics, talk about the profitability, walk through every feedback that we received. So transparency became a really, significant thing. And so what this gave them, the feeling was like, okay, we're all in this together. We're going to work through this together. And it ended up making every person like a mini CEO. So everybody knew what was going on. Like they knew why it was important, like to manage the wastage. They knew why it was important to get the good feedback ratings and so forth. And so I think that was one way where, COVID caused a disruption, and then we kind of dealt with it. We made sure that, all the exec, and this may be a common theme in some of the COVID related things, the exec team took cuts so that the rank and file would not be disturbed. We ensured that everybody was vaccinated. Like basically I spent a lot of time just, because the vaccine was not available, like basically working all the lines of influence to get our team vaccinated, so that customers in turn could be aware that the food they were getting was from vaccinated people. We opened up the kitchen, we would film it and show like what was happening in the kitchen. So transparency became a really big way for people to get us, build the trust. See, like, okay, we're doing the best we can, we're doing all of this together. So I think that was one way that we had to bring the stakeholders together, whether it was investors or employees or even customers, right? Customers also became like an extended part of the family, and they also got this view into what was happening inside the company. Does that answer your question?
Sure. And on that, Neha, what was the biggest challenge you faced during your journey? I mean, COVID was obviously, for many, many companies, it was a completely, what is it called, black swan kind of an event. Nobody was prepared. But all entrepreneurs face many, many challenges, right? Why don't you elaborate on something that really, really, was a big challenge for you?
I think once in our journey, we reached a point where we didn't have runway. We didn't have runway to pay 3 months' salary. And so we are sitting in Jan and we're like, we have salary till March, and what are we going to do, right? And I think for a founder, that's the worst thing that can happen, right? And it was war room. We basically got ourselves into a room and we said we're not getting out till we figure out a solution. It was the core team, me and my co-founder, and I think that was probably the most challenging. And the best part is we actually emerged out of it much stronger, raised the next round within 6 months, and I think I would say that was the most challenging.
Yeah, and we know so many companies, currently also we are going through a sort of a rough time for fundraising, and in our own portfolio there are companies who are going through a very similar situation, and navigating fundraising when you don't have runway is critical, as you go along and you start planning your exit, I want to ask you a little technical question. When you're thinking or when you start conversations, for whatever reasons that you go towards an exit conversation, as founders, are you aware of what your rights are and what you can get out of this? Because as investors, we know exactly, right? And when you sign the SHA in the beginning or for every round, we as investors make sure our rights are there. How many founders really understand what their rights are, especially towards when the liquidity event comes? And again, is there a way to really make it a more fair deal or protect yourself? Neha, did you know what your rights were when you were going towards the exit conversation, or did you really do the math for it? Did you really think about what is fair, or how smooth was it?
Yeah. No, I think very valid point, and I do know startups, and I do know founder friends who've had a lot of trouble because the legal paperwork at the SHA stage was not drawn out correctly. I think in our case, in our third round of funding, which was a year before the exit, the SHA was crystal clear. So I think I'm happy that I had a good law firm who was managing and was the legal counsel. They really drilled it down in terms of what it means beyond the legal jargon. But you're right. I mean, there can be crazy, clauses that are there in the SHA. Something as simple as a liquidation preference, right, can really impact an exit, right, which basically ends up becoming that the founder doesn't get anything, right. So a lot of these clauses are there, and you'll be surprised. I mean, we'll all be surprised that it's actually pretty common. So super important for you to know that the legal counsel understands these clauses, makes you sort of know you negotiated at an SHA stage and not at an exit stage, because then it's too late.
Yeah, no, very critical when you sign your first SHA or whichever SHA, that as founders you understand, and actually as investors also, it's very important that the founder knows what he or she is signing, because that actually leads many a times to friction, and sometimes it's unnecessary. I think it should always be a win-win. But the founders, of course, have to realize that somebody is coming in, buying a part of your company, and they will have rights because you're taking their money. But at the same time, Jyotsana, I want you to also answer as somebody who's now an investor. Jyotsana works with me in my fund. How do you now view when you are giving an SHA to a founder? Do you think of it differently? And of course, elaborate on your experience as well as you were navigating your exit.
Absolutely. So I think as a founder, signing an SHA, many times it's the investor's lawyer who's drawing up the SHA, right? So you have to get your own legal counsel, which represents you as a person. So I think that's very significant, because when you're signing the SHA, everybody's in a very happy honeymoon phase. So like, hey, everything is going to be fine. This person's going to be great. But I think, things change. Sometimes the person who signed the SHA may no longer be at the, investment firm. Someone else might be there. So I think it's important to get your own legal representation to at least look over the documentation. And I think that sometimes, changes may come in the MOA, AOA, all of those things. You don't have to boil the ocean, but just make sure that you have someone looking this over from your point of view as a person. I think now as an investor looking at the SHA, many times, I think in that sense we're very different, because if we see something that's not friendly to the founder, we call the founder and say like, have you read this properly? Are you sure that you want to sign this document, right? I think in some cases we found, maybe in the sale of their stake, or maybe they may not be treated fairly. So in that sense, we're a little different insofar as we call them and say like, do you know what this is saying? Do you know what the implications are? And I think that in the end, like, because it's a small fraternity, in some sense, a sorority even, what goes around comes around, right? Like, I think that people will always remember someone, an investor who looked out for them. And in the end, like, we're not that kind of investor who's like, I should just get my outcome and like, doesn't matter what happens to the founder. I think Paula has some very interesting stories also about those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, there are founders also who really want to give the money back. Most of the founders are the sort, that this investor has backed me, and, I want to, give back for the support that they give. So I had a couple of cases where actually we had all the liquidation rights, and we thought that the founder is not getting anything, and we actually gave some of our gains to the founder, because of course the founder has given many years of their lives, right? The founders have given. And in another case, actually, the founders thought that they hadn't been fair to us because they couldn't give the returns that they thought they will give. And actually, they negotiated to actually give back some of their own from their ESOPs. So, we can make it win-win if it's a true partnership. And the ecosystem is changing. I think there is much more transparency. And as we have more cases of exits, I think these things will evolve, and I think a lot of education does need to be done on both ends. On that note, before we open it up, I want to just have the last word from you. How did you feel when you exited? And what do you think, if you were still running the company, what would you be visualizing the company to be today? Neha?
I think felt very elated when we exited, because of one reason. I think we saw ESOPs actually getting liquidated, and the team creating wealth. And I remember a lot of the people who joined us on day one booking a car, doing a down payment for their house. And I think that for me was a feeling that I will do this again for. Yeah, sorry, what was the second question?
But it was your baby that you were giving
Yeah.
away. Well, how did that make you feel?
Yeah. It was really difficult actually. I remember the CureFit team. I remember Mukesh asking, "Are you sure, right? You want to do this?" Because it's like your own baby. The kind of culture you've created, the team that you've created, it's very difficult to let it go. And yeah, but I think overall it sort of turned out well. And if I had not exited, I think we would have hopefully ridden the wave of COVID and come out stronger. But I think in net, in all sort of ways, I think it was the right decision for everybody.
So I think there is a point in an entrepreneur's life when, you can say that, okay, this ride has been good, let me go on another journey. And, that's a positive way of looking at rather than it making it very emotional. It's always emotional, but I think, a good outcome helps. Also, it just means that it's a new beginning of something. So, Jyotsana, I know that it was also hard for you because I was an investor in her company, and she really loved building it up. So, share your emotion, and do you itch to go back to it?
So for the longest time, I was like, should I start this again, right? Because I felt, there was still the need for health and so forth is still such a big unsolved problem in our country. So I definitely had the mixed emotions because I felt that, nobody could execute my vision the way I could, which is obviously makes sense. But at the same time, I also shared that sense of satisfaction that I could give security and a future to many of the staff who had been with us for a very long journey. I wouldn't, so I just feel like, this is a hard question to answer, right? I think that I feel like, if we'd not sold it, obviously, we were planning international expansion and all of that stuff. But I think, in some sense, COVID was, COVID came and as like she said, black swan event, and it's not reset. The world has not gone back to the same as it was before COVID, right? So I think reinvention and relooking and all of that stuff. I feel glad that we didn't. In that some sense, we didn't have to grapple with the post-COVID realities, and we were able to, get, the staff good employment, good exits, for a while. So I think it's much more of a complicated answer. Yes, and I was happy, but I also had mixed feelings.
Great. On that note, I'm sure there are many entrepreneurs here as well. So we'll open it up for questions from the floor.
Hi everyone. Hello. So thanks a lot for sharing the A to Z journey. Sometimes we only read and we listen to stories that are starting up and at the stage before exit and all that. So thanks for that. Gives a lot of perspective for new founders and first-time founders like me. I'm Shubhangi and I'm also in the wellness space. And what I would ask you guys to give advice on. So I'm a product-first company building in mental wellness, which is nascent, which is new. People have not seen many success stories, especially in India. So there is a resistance from the capital side. But we are also at a stage where it's pre-product market fit and we are building for revenue and all those things. So what would be your advice to people build the product but pre-product market fit? What can I do to make it successful? Thanks.
I can just tell you what I did, right? I think that I looked at my own data. So we have a hypothesis-driven approach, and we use that in our investing also. We basically, before we looked at our data, we said this is what we expect to find. And then when the data didn't match that, we said, okay, that's the germ of a realization, right? So I'll just give you one. So basically, when we had, first we gave away the product for free, got a whole bunch of data, mapped the hypothesis to the data. Wherever there was a gap was the beginning of an insight, right? And then you built on that insight. That was, that's a way that we always very data driven and saying what do we expect to see, what are we seeing, where's that delta. And that helped us to get to product market fit. We also looked at mental health. Mental health is a huge unsolved problem. And I think where our hypothesis was that mental health and physical health were contiguous, but we found that was not the same. The person was looking for mental health solutions very different. So, we were able to discover it early and kind of let it go. If that makes, basically, if that helps shed any insight. And every time we were like, okay, what's going to help us grow and what are the blockers in that, and like how do we solve those blockers. Sometimes it required us to reimagine the product, and then we would have to do that.
I think similar to what Jyotsana mentioned, but I think just one additional thing, define what is PMF, what is your product market fit, because there are various definitions. I would go to top 3 guys in the industry, maybe one investor, one mentor, one somebody else who you really sort of value. Define exactly what is PMF for me, what scale, what number of people, what app downloads, down to the T. And once you have that set, then just go into that, right? Outcome backward. What you really need to do, whether it takes you sort of, let's say, 2 years to get there, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Kim?
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your stories. It's really exciting to hear about exits. I just had a question about, if you're going through this journey and you yourself, I don't know, your backgrounds before this, but if you yourself are not, you're not aware of how this works, you're not a deal maker, you don't really know how to get through it, there are lots of people out there who are ready to give you advice. And you may yourself, seek them out and ask, this is being proposed to me, what should I do, how should I do it? So I just wanted to get a sense from you of like, how do you navigate that advice? Did you guys particularly find, say, I'm only taking advice from this person or this set of people, or only from women, or only from, people experienced in my field, or how did you decide who to listen to? Because I think there are a lot of voices. And I think it's great to come to this event because they were getting voices that we don't normally hear. So thank you.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sorry. I think you're right. There is a lot of advice that comes your way. I would take advice from somebody who's given me money and who's an investor first, because they really want me to succeed, right? And second, I will take advice from people who I appoint as guys who I want to take advice from. So for example, right, early on, I knew that because I have never done a fundraise in my life, right? I have never raised capital. I've never been on the side of a meeting where I'm raising money. I needed to understand what it is like. So I reached out to an investment banker friend, told him to help me in my initial raise. And when I understood that, I managed my Series A accordingly, right? So I think really then reaching out to people in pockets that you require, whether it is fundraising, investment banker, your paperwork, or legal counsel, and then seeking out those people. And like I mentioned earlier, right, I really believe in the concept of having a board of directors for your life. Who are those guys? Who are the guys in your life board who you call and who you reach out to when things are going down, right? And those are the guys who you sort of carefully select over a period of time. It could take 10 years, 20 years. But once you have those guys, they're going to advise you what is really needed for you at that point of time. I hope that helps.
Is there like a specific thing that you, or is it generally like the outpouring of advice that you want to be able to filter?
No, I think it's more specifically around, like, as you said, if you already have an investor, then you can take, then you're kind of on the same team and you can take advice from them, and that's great. But even getting that first investor, how to do it, should you do it, should you not? Those kinds of questions, I think, are there if you've never done this before. But I think it's more, I guess it's more like, not, if some people will give you advice, you may even ask them for advice. And sometimes you're just like, instinctively, I don't think they're right. I don't know. And then you're you have all these voices in your head saying, you always have to do this if you're doing that. And you're like, but always? Like, it doesn't seem right
Yeah.
to me, right? So how do you trust your instinct versus trusting all these people who are experienced?
Yeah, I would always go with, I wouldn't call it instinct, but your judgment. I mean, trust your judgment. I think because you're the expert on your product, your goals, your vision, all of those things, right? And then, again, like leading with the hypothesis, saying that, you might say, I'm thinking of raising funding, like, what do you think? And then run it through your own filter. And then, like, discard whatever doesn't make sense to you or doesn't resonate with you. I think I also have like I have a group of peers that I go to. It's actually a formal structure, which is called a forum. And Paula knows about this because many of the forum members are in her investee companies. But we get together and we give, we don't give feedback, we share similar experiences. Like when I was raising funding, this is what I did, and so forth. So there may be some organizations like EO, YPO, your own business school, organizations which have some similar support structures who are trusted and confidential, that you can run ideas by. But I'm really a big believer in that you know best, your judgment is the best judgment. Right?
But I mean, there are many forums, for founders, which you can be part of to just understand what other people are going through. I think that would help.
Good evening. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. My question is a little different. You go from a bootstrap company to first round of funding, or you raise, wherever you're raising funds, primary, secondary, whatever it is. How does your team deal with that? And how did you deal with the culture of the organization after you did it the first time round?
When you're talking, is your question more like, was the team expecting more salary or whatever? What do you?
Yeah, just in general. I mean, leadership styles. Obviously, the culture that you've built from the beginning. When you know everyone to like a stage, you've got like X number of employees, and then there's money into the company. You're not necessarily accessible to everybody all the time.
Right.
Indefinitely.
Well, sure.
So
yeah.
how do you kind of manage those expectations with your team and your culture, and avoid that like mass exodus, or we didn't sign up for this, or however.
So when I was building my team, I always got people who can be role models, right? And allow them to build their own team. So for example, if I had to hire a chef, then I would hire a chef who could mentor the team, bring on the team. So at any time, I only had to manage the top layer. I didn't have to manage I didn't have to manage anyone below. And that's why when COVID came around, and then, I had to, be open to every single person, that was a kind of a little bit of a shift. But I think if you get those master crafts people, right, who can teach and train the next level of leadership, then that's a massive advantage. And simply because you're taking on more and more of the CEO role, you would not be able to help them with the day-to-day activity. So you need someone there who can help them become the next better version of themselves, if that makes sense, right? So you have to have a second layer in between you and the next rank and file.
I think there's one more question at the back.
Hi, my name is Zuili. I'm the co-founder of a beauty tech startup called Smudge. So we're basically doing an AI product discovery and skin analysis tool for the beauty industry. And I have two questions, but they're kind of linked. My first is, when did you raise your first round? At what stage? Was it pre-revenue, early stage, seed? And then after you answer, I'll ask my second question.
Just say it.
Yeah, just can you ask them both?
So my next question was, how has that definition of a seed company or an early stage company changed from when you raised your round? Because I'm assuming it was before COVID, before what is happening in the current funding scenario, and how has that definition kind of changed? Because I'm actively raising and I'm in my go-to-market early stage, but when I talk to investors, their definition and perception of an early stage company is very different than what we have in our minds. So I just kind of wanted to ask that. Yeah.
Okay, so I think there are 3 phases. Idea on a slide is one stage. Second stage is pilot. Third stage is PMF and early revenues. And I'm talking about early stage, I'm not talking about growth. And it depends on the investor. So for example, idea on a slide may not work for anybody, right? And that's not seed, that's actually pre-seed round. So I think the definitions are pretty fuzzy between these 3 phases in my opinion, and I think Paula is the right person to answer that. But I would sort of say that you're at the right place to raise money when you know that this is your product, and by doing XYZ you will get to product market fit. And you're raising money for product market fit. Either you're in that bucket, in that case it's pre-seed or seed, or else you've proven product market fit and you want basically, early revenue stage, right? Paula, please.
Yeah, even for angel investing, which is really very early, in your pre-seed, you do need the entrepreneur to be able to articulate very clearly and even show somewhat what the product is. The product can be refined later with that capital, but just with an idea in the head, it's exceedingly hard for anybody to give money unless you really know something about it and you know the founder. But that's an exception. As a general rule, you must demonstrate what is it you want to build, what problem are you solving, and how. That has to be articulated quite clearly and demonstrated to some extent, not the final product. And many times founders say, but you're an angel, so you should be able to. The point is that you have to invest in something that you can understand and how it will be built out. So you have to be able to map that out very, very clearly. If you can't, then there is nobody who will. Put yourself in the shoes of the investor. If you talk to somebody which is completely in thin air, it's difficult. And product market fit should be visible. It may not be there fully, but like Neha rightly said, it should be at least visible. Who's your TG? How are you going to demonstrate product market fit? Look, there is not a single company, and I may have seen thousands in my last 20 years, not a single company which has really actually demonstrated that they were executed on the first plan that was presented to an angel or a seed investor. That Excel sheet one can throw away. But the point is, you must have a strong idea of what you're building. Don't expect somebody to get on board when you yourself are not clear.
Yeah. There's only one exception to that, is when you're coming as a EIR. So I was an EIR, and before I did anything, I had $1 million in the bank, right? And the whole idea was you're going to do something broadly in health, go and take this and do something with it. And then come to us when you think you've got the beginnings of scale, right? And I think there's a pluses and minuses. On the pluses side, you have the money to hire a team and think boldly. On the minuses, from the very first day, you've given away equity. So those are the trade-offs, right? If you're building, let's say, like something which was something's very, very new, you think that it's going to break the paradigm, then it's you should have people who will invest in you just because they think you can build something. But in most cases, it just is benefit for every single person. If you've including the founder, if you've already got some unique insight. What is a unique insight that's going to become the germ of a company and become like 100 times, 1,000 times bigger than what you're seeing now, right?
Thank you.
Well, on that note, I think we'll have to call it a day. I think it was wonderful talking to this audience, and thank you so much for very candidly sharing your journeys and your experiences. And a big shout out to Radhika for really putting this group together. We need many more platforms like this and bringing many more women together. And we look forward to a lot more entrepreneurs and a lot more women investors as well. Thank you again. Good night.